Hello everybody and welcome to Forever Rugby on Forever Sports for today's Rainbow Cup South Africa Round 3 review. A very interesting round which saw wins for the Stormers and a huge win for the Bulls, and for the Lions a heartbreaking loss, and for the Sharks back to the drawing board really after being completely outplayed by a very, very strong Bulls outfit. Before we sort of break down some of the games and sort of take a look at what sort of we saw over the weekend, a couple of the sort of the standout moments, please do make sure you subscribe to the channel, smash a like on the video as well. We are pushing for 1,400 subscribers. I think we're about 40 away, so please do smash a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Right, so the weekend started with a trip to Ellis Park, the first game in fact at in Johannesburg, the entire tournament, with the Lions being on the road for their clashes against the Bulls and the Sharks, which means as we're now past the halfway point, the Lions will now have 2 home games and 1 away game. So hopefully for the Joburg franchise, they are up against it, but hopefully an opportunity once back at Ellis Park, playing a very different brand of rugby than what they did in the first 2 rounds, might be able to find some points. But if we look at the Lions versus Stormers game, it really was a game where the Lions lost it rather than the Stormers won it. And I don't want to take credit away from the Stormers, but the Lions played some very good rugby, and were really, the tries that they scored really well were tries. And the tries they conceded was really poor defense. If you look at the Marcel Tennyson try where he ran, past 2 defenders, he pretty much just sort of threw an odd arm. Look at that Edward van der Merwe. it's fantastic acceleration from the wing, but he dances around 3 players. And you think that if one of those players make that tackle and that try doesn't get scored, whereas you look at the tries that the Lions scored, especially that last one, which was a huge scrum, and then going down the blind side one, and an easy pass and a run-in for Ravis Matwana, who actually scored his first try for the Lions. It was a really nicely worked try. And I think that the Stormers were a few minutes away from having a massive, massive headache, because the Lions were in the lead, and they were, for 2.5 minutes, they were just going through the phases. And they went one phase too many, really, and they picked off, and they actually gained a little momentum, which I don't think they really wanted to, but they ended up sort of breaking away from the rest of the forwards and got a little bit isolated. However, there are some big debate about whether Herschel Yankees, who actually won the penalty, which allowed the Stormers to get into the Lions half, they then won the penalty and managed to kick over thanks to an 82nd minute, I think it was, penalty by Tim Sweel to win the game 39-37. There's a little bit of debate about whether Herschel Yankees ever actually released the play and whether it was a legal turnover. But Nick Madden was saying in the studio, he says that as a side, if you do sort of play, it's a bit negative. It's what the Bulls used to do very well. They'll seal for game, and you literally just pick and drive, and all you're doing is pretty much taking your shoulder and placing the ball, and it's almost impossible for other teams to try and turn over the ball, because you've got 2 or 3 ball carriers with you who then sort of close the ball away. And Nick Madden was saying that if you do that too many times, that the referee is looking for a way to penalize you. The first any sort of mistake, they're going to give the benefit of the doubt to the defending side, because it's one of the sort of nature things which is so difficult to defend. So if you do it properly, it's great, but you have to make sure that you are 100% correct every single time, because the referee is looking for a way to try and break that up, because it doesn't make for good viewing. And that's what happened with the Lions. But I thought the Lions looked a bit like the Lions of old. It really was a case of they said that we're going to outscore you. And I think with better defense, should have won that game. Scored some very nice tries. I thought Jordan Hendricks, man of the match on debut, one of the 2 man of the matches who will fly halves this weekend. Morné Steyn putting a masterclass for the Bulls. But I thought when he was playing, it looked like a whole different Lions side. They threw the ball around. They played a lot about in the fringes. They also dominated a bit in the forward pack. I think that was a very big difference. It's difficult to judge Fred Zeilinger, who was playing behind a pack that was getting dismantled. But Jordan Hendricks, Carly Sada, I thought was very good. And equally, the 2 replacement props, Ruan Dre and Asinate Tlabakanya, put the Stormers replacement front row on the back foot. And I think that played a big part. But the Lions went back to what they knew. They were throwing the ball around, they were playing a bit in the loose, and it looked much, much better from the Joburg side, who really have nothing to lose. For the Stormers, the defense was decent. I think they had an 88% tackle success rate. Once again, I think the difference for them between the Lions game and the Bulls game is when they had those half chances, they managed to score tries. They managed to score points. That Edward van der Merwe try was fantastic. Skipped around 2 players and then had the pace to round E.W. Viljoen, who's not the fastest player in the world. But you got to exploit those opportunities, and that's what the Stormers did quite well. Marcel Tennyson saw a half gap, he took it and he dove over. So in many ways, it was a in many ways, it was a worse performance, I thought, from the Stormers than they did against the Bulls, but they couldn't find a way to score points against the Bulls, and yet against the Lions, they managed to find a way to score points. I thought Rick Pretorius and Dan Duplessis were really looking good as a combination, one of their best games together, but Adam Van was bad. It was quite nice seeing the two young fly halves operating with a lot of confidence. Herschel Yankees had some very nice moments, so I thought the Stormers was an improved performance from the first game, but I think that it's interesting how the cookie crumbles, how in a game against the Bulls where they dominated the stats, dominated possession, dominated territory, they couldn't score points, and yet against the Lions it was a little bit of the opposite. But when they had those half chances, they made it count, and suddenly they win a game, 39 points to 37. It was a really good watch. I know we don't like, a lot of people are saying that as much as they like seeing a lot of tries, they don't like seeing high-scoring games. But this really was a good watch because it wasn't a case of a massive comeback. It wasn't a case of the Lions having a 25-point lead and the Stormers coming in. It was close the entire game. I think it was 29-29 for a long time. Then a couple of penalties crept in. So we never knew. The game was in the balance for the entire 80, which makes for really good viewing. If it's going to be high-scoring, it needs to be a nice sort of combination of they try to score and then they score. And it's always sort of ebbing and flowing. You don't want to see a 65-40 victory. It's 100 points, but it's fairly one-sided. And then in the Bulls versus the Sharks game, the first half, the Sharks employed a kicking game, which was working pretty well, I thought. I thought that, in the high felt, you got to try and make sure that you do as little as possible as a traveling coastal side because the fitness will become an issue. You're not used to playing at altitude. These players are fitter than you. They are. They're trained at higher altitude. That's just a fact. So the Sharks' game management was going to be so important. I thought Curtin Bosch was doing very well in the first half. He had some very, very nice kicks in behind, and they were actually doing quite a good job of disrupting the Bulls' lineout. But once again, a bit like the Stormers of last week, they struggled to turn these opportunities into points. A couple of times where they kicked towards the corner, couldn't really score a try. They didn't score a try the entire game. I think it's the second game in a row the Bulls have gone without actually conceding a try. So it was interesting in that sort of respect where it was the Sharks dominating the territory but not being able to find the points. That's why they went, I think when they went into the half-time, it was 12-6, which I thought was a strange reflection because the Bulls were doing very well. They weren't in the game very much in the first half, but when they got into the Sharks half, they won a penalty, and Morné Steyn was kicking beautifully. He was a man of the match performance for him at the ripe old age of, I think he's 37 in July. And then the second half came, and everything changed. The Bulls, it was a bit of a masterclass from Jake White because he decided, put the Sharks through the first half, and then he said, right, half-time, he's got Gqoboka, Trevor Nyakane on, and they were immense. I think Gqoboka is going to go into the team of the week without a shadow of a doubt. Played 40 minutes, but he was sublime. Scored their first try, which is sort of a bit of momentum shifting, but at scrum times, suddenly the Bulls had a whole new dynamic. They suddenly had that front foot ball. I think they had 81% of the possession in the second half. That's incredible. They ran in 4 tries to win 43 points to 9. And yet it was from 12 to 43, and the Sharks scored us in the second half. It was a terrific second half effort from the Bulls. Also thought Albert Lowe came on for Arno Boerta, who looks like his Rainbow Cup has come to an end. Jake White said he doesn't think it's a major hamstring injury. He's hoping it's going to be like 4 or 5 weeks. That's the thing with a hamstring. As soon as you tweak it, you're out for a couple of weeks. It's not like it's a knock, Some people get like a sting on the shoulder, and you can miss a week and then be back. Hamstrings are always a long time, but it doesn't look like he's torn it because I think a torn hamstring can set you back months, and it's one of those things that often re-injures itself. But he says he doesn't think it's too serious, but he reckons that it is probably sort of 4 or 5 weeks. So we won't see Arno Boerta again this campaign. Albert Lowe came on and was tremendous. He carried the ball up well. He made lots of tackles, and the Sharks just could not get their hand on the ball. For the Sharks, it's a decent defensive effort. If you look at like tackle percentage-wise and stuff like that, they were making their tackles, but the Bulls were exploiting the space. They were going out wide a lot of the time. They were finding a lot of space. They pretty much just ran the Sharks off the park. The Sharks looked exhausted. That rolling maul try, you could just see the Sharks were just not up for it. They were just exhausted. They couldn't keep up. They were dead on their feet. So that's what the Bulls did very well. If you look at the Sharks' big defensive efforts, Siya Kolisi was the game's top tackler. He made 15 tackles, didn't miss one a turnover as well, made more tackles than anybody else, so a nice performance by him. Henko Fenter also contributing with 14 tackles, so a couple of decent defensive efforts from the Sharks, but Deddy didn't have that sort of front foot ball and didn't manage to sort of make it count. And I think the biggest issue is you've got Curtin Bosch, and people are now sort of criticizing Curtin Bosch quite a lot because they're saying that because he's got such a big kicking game, they can't get what is a very talented backline into the game more. And I suppose there's a little bit of merit in that. I thought that Curtin Bosch was managing the game quite well in the first half, but there's a certain amount of merit in if you have, when they do, now you're going to have Mapimpi, Spoon, Corsi, Lukanya in that backline. Those are 3 devastatingly good players on the attack. are they best utilized chasing down kicks all day? At what point, can they try and get this backline? But the problem is, in order to get this backline in, they've got to dominate that forward collision. I think that's the biggest problem, is that pack was played out the park. Those two props came on for the Bulls. Albert Lowe was immense, and the Sharks pack couldn't compete. I think they need some heavyweights in that pack. You're probably looking at somebody like a Henko Fenter and thinking, do they need to maybe try and find someone more in the mold of P. Steph Toy? You've got to probably get two big locks, and I think they need to find a hooker as well. I mean, we know that Siaklis is going to start, and we know that Sika Mozanoche is going to start. And somebody was saying they're similar. I don't think they're that similar, because I think Sika Mozanoche is somebody who's very good playing in the loose in the attack, whereas Siaklis is a very good defensive player. But they've got to add some bulk. They've got to go and try and find an Etzebeth, an Archia Snyman. They've got to go and find, if you look at the work that Ruan Nokia is doing and Walt Steenkamp's doing, they need to find some big players who are going to dominate those forwards collision. I think Oxenchair and Thomas Latour are very good props, but I think they've also got to go and find you've got a Malcolm Marks or a Bongi Manambi. You just got to find somebody who's adding a bit to the breakdown, adding a bit of bulk, adding a bit of physicality so that they can try and compete with the Bulls pack. Because when you've got that front foot ball, and you can start then using Lakanya and Spoon Corsi and Makazola Mapimpi and Apalele Fassi, there's some devastatingly fast and very good players in the attack. But until that pack dominates, they're not going to be able to get into the game. And that's what the Bulls are doing. I think the Bulls, that backline, it's not like it's Springbok riddled. It really isn't. It's Mornay Steyn and Ambrose Papier. That's Captain Cornel Hendricks. So it's very good players. But you're looking at Marco Jansen and Fury, you're looking at Madosh Tom, West Ravina Jacobs, and David Creel. They're not Springboks. They're not these sensational players. Like for like, you probably think the Sharks' backline is better, but they don't have that forward ascendancy, and that's the issue. We saw with the Lions, as soon as they started dominating with the pack, the backline started coming in together. You've got to win the battle up front, and then you can bring that backline into play. So very interesting this weekend. So we're looking at the log. This is how the log currently looks now. The Bulls 3 out of 3 with 13 points. And the reason that Sean Everett was quite optimistic in the post-match is he said, you know what? We've been outplayed. We got manhandled was the word he actually used. And yet we're 3 points behind the Bulls. So he says, this can change very quickly. They still think they can win this competition. They can. They have to go now and beat the Sharks and the Stormers. Maybe the Sharks and Stormers do a favor and do a job against the Bulls. But often, it could now then come down to the next clash between the Sharks and the Bulls. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the sort of log plays out. So the Sharks in second with 10th, Stormers 7 points in third. So they're not far behind the Sharks, but equally so, the Lions are one victory away from being right behind the Stormers. If the Lions were to put in a huge performance and get a bonus point victory against the Bulls next week, it's very unlikely. But if they were to do that, suddenly they could overtake the Stormers. So because it's only sort of 3 teams, we've only played 3 matches, we've only got 3 matches to go. This table can turn like that. As I said, if the Lions put in a bonus point victory against the Bulls don't take points. The Lions can go up to 8 points, 5 points behind the Bulls. So this table is definitely not set. But if the Stormers beat the Sharks and the Bulls beat the Lions, which I think is both pretty possible, suddenly that Bulls are sitting fairly pretty at the top of that table. So next weekend we're going to see the Sharks taking on the Stormers. That is happening at Durban, and the Lions are hosting the Bulls. After that, on the Friday, the 4th of June, it's going to be the Bulls hosting the Stormers, and the Lions will take on the Sharks in Johannesburg. And then on the last weekend, the Lions are traveling down to Cape Town to take on the Stormers, and the Sharks will be hosting the Bulls in Durban. So, that Sharks-Bulls clash is going to be that all sort of, potentially at this stage, who's going to finish up with the log. So that's how it's looking at the moment. If you look at the points difference, Sharks and Lions are the equal points difference, and yet the Lions, 7 points behind. But 3 teams with negative points difference, which shows you it's actually been quite close. All the games have been fairly close, apart from that Bulls-Sharks game. It's been the biggest victory of the tournament. So it's been quite good watching, to be honest. But let me know what you think of the games down below. I think the standard's improving. I'm actually really enjoying the Rainbow Cup. Much better for me than the preparation series, even to a certain degree the Curry Cup. I think the standard of rugby is higher, and I think there is a lot more competitiveness. So let me know what you think down in the comments below. Smash a like on the video. Do subscribe to the channel if you are new. My name is Steven, and I'll chat to you soon.